And we are going to do another deep dive into what do undocumented immigrants actually receive from our government. And I did this deep dive the day before yesterday, so 2 days ago. What day is it today? Today's Thursday? Yeah, I did this deep dive on Tuesday, but I'm also going to elaborate a little bit further because it's important for us to understand in this politically tumultuous time who is living among us. And I just want to point out the people living among us are all humans, I think, hopefully. And there's this fear. There is an excess amount of fear from Republicans, the far right, always about undocumented immigrants mooching off the government. If you actually did a shred of research into the topic of how much undocumented immigrants actually contribute to our government versus how much they actually take from our government, it's quite a different story. And I don't think our news media has done a good job at actually highlighting the objective reality around this. So, if you don't see something being done, do it yourself. So, this is where I come in. I've actually been doing a lot of research, and I'm going to continue doing it, on how much undocumented immigrants contribute in taxes and what kinds of benefits they actually receive from the government, if any. And the answers might actually shock or surprise you, so that's why I'm doing this deep dive. Now, I will share my opinion, sure, my analysis. You can disagree with it. That's fine. You do you, boo. Though I'm also just going to share raw, objective, factual information. And that's not up for debate. There are some people that like to try and make the objective reality at hand somehow like, oh, well, that's up for debate. No, it's not. Facts are not up for debate. So I've reached every single one of you. Good morning to all of my moderators. Good morning, Kate, Akicha, Maiden for me. Oh, hello, Lefty Query. Oh, hello. Good to see you. Aw. So I appreciate every single one of you. I'm going to be doing this deep dive. I am going to hide away the chat just for a little bit, or for the whole live, honestly, because there are people that constantly rage type trying to get my attention, and I don't want to give them any oxygen. So you're like, well, why, Scott, are you focusing on this topic? Well, you'll see headlines like this. Chicago mayor flat out says that Trump declared war on his city after president calls for his arrest. Also, it's not a secret, Donald Trump has now actually decided to go after Boston, is what I've heard last. I would have to double check that, but just throwing that all out there. View host dares Christians not to feel brokenhearted at children begging ICE thugs to leave their parents. You have people that are peacefully protesting, including, members of clergy. So watch ICE sued after videos capture pastors shot with chemical pellets at a peaceful protest. You have these people that are covering their faces and just kidnapping people off the street. Illinois and Chicago sue to block National Guard deployment and take a swipe at Trump admin over the Department of War. I love how they're trying to claim that they're so peaceful, yet they rebranded it to be the Department of War. You have far-right influencers like Benny Johnson posting AI videos about beating up immigrants, particularly women. And it's like, that doesn't make you a masculine bro, dude. That makes you disgusting. Chicago police saying 27 of their own officers were affected by tear gas. And, you have White House accuses Chicago mayor of defending killers and rapists with ICE-free zones. And Chicago mayor creates ICE-free zones to block raids by rogue arrest teams. You get the point. So all of this being said, I want to do a deep dive into, who is living among us. And there are undocumented immigrants in our country. 10% of the workforce in California are undocumented people. That's a sizable chunk. And you say, oh, well, they don't have papers to be here. But they're also still human beings. They are still people. We can't engage in this dehumanization rhetoric. So it's important for us to know who these people are, how much they contribute to our government, our economy, our communities. Then also, how much do they actually get in benefits from the government, if any? Oh, I see a super chat that just popped in. Aw, C-Bar, good morning. Hello. C-Bar is a good friend of the live. So C-Bar, you're amazing. I'm sending lots of love to you. You're awesome and incredible. It always brings joy when I see, familiar faces in here. I appreciate every single one of you. Y'all are awesome. And to all the people that are so, you're like, oh my God, they're illegal. Oh, seriously, why are you so afraid of fellow human beings? Like, why are you afraid of undocumented people? Isn't that kind of silly? Like, yes, they're here without official citizenship. Okay. They're also still people. Like, they shouldn't be undocumented. But what is the trigger mechanism that makes you so physically afraid of an undocumented person? Have you met undocumented people? They don't like the fact they're undocumented. They're terrified of it. But you know how long it takes before you even get a hearing in front of a judge? Sometimes it takes up to 10 years. So before you start to fearmonger about a group of people you've clearly never met, maybe you should actually listen and get to know these people. Because that's what God and Christ would want you to do anyway. Anyway, so I want to do this deep dive into how much do undocumented immigrants actually pay in taxes and how much do they actually receive in benefits from the government. So from now on, you're just going to see me give just raw factual information. Raw factual information. That's not up for debate. It's just raw factual information. You can take with it what you may. Just know that from here on, it's going to be just raw factual news coverage. All right. So the the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy did this big breakdown of how much undocumented immigrants actually contribute in taxes. Now, governments, the way that they're set up is you have taxes, money coming into the government from corporations, individuals, etc. And then you have government spending, which is allocated by the government, which is allocated by Congress, saying, okay, we're going to spend this much here or this much here. We have this program here. That's how our system works. Theoretically, governments are set up so that they are shaped by the policy of the people, where they bring in and tax certain people, and then they spend it on certain things. Government raising and spending of money shows their priorities. So, how much do undocumented immigrants actually pay in taxes? Well, you and I both know that there's a lot of different types of taxes. You have sales tax, excise tax, estate tax, property tax, payroll tax, all of that. So there's a lot of ways that we as citizens are taxed and that money goes to the government. And then the government, shaped by our leaders, goes out and spends that. Whether it's subsidies or whether it's spending for healthcare for citizens or education or, etc. So let's look at how much undocumented immigrants actually paid in taxes. In 2022, now data for 2023-4 is still not fully in yet because it takes a lot of time to compile all of this. But the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group, they did this big research deep dive into undocumented immigrants and how much they paid in taxes. And it was about $100 billion, 96.7 billion to be exact. And that includes federal, state, and local taxes in 2022. Now, most of that amount, most of that is in federal taxes. So it's 59.4 billion was paid to the federal government. The remaining 37.3 billion was paid to state and local governments. Now, what's interesting is when you break it down per person that's undocumented by their research methods understanding, it totals to about 8,889 per person. So basically for every 1 million undocumented immigrants, that means that public services in taxes, they receive 8.9 billion in additional tax revenue from those people. So that all being said, that's just the raw numbers. That undocumented immigrants pay a lot of money in taxes. But what's really interesting is because of the status that they are undocumented, they cannot receive benefits from the government. So I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born and raised in North Carolina. That all being said, because I'm a U.S. citizen, I have different IDs. I have a social security number, driver's license. I need to go get my real ID here soon. That all being said, undocumented immigrants don't have the official social security number to access certain programs. Sometimes they actually try to pass off that they use another person's social security number, but then they can't actually qualify for it. They don't physically get through. So as a way to blend in, sometimes they will take someone else's security number, social security number, as a way to kind of oh yeah, I'm a US citizen. We'll talk about that further. But because of their status, simply put, because of undocumented people's status, they pay taxes into the system, sales tax, property tax, payroll tax, but they don't actually receive any benefits from the government. So as a US citizen, just imagine that you pay $8,889 in taxes. That is your tax filing, but through sales tax, property tax, payroll taxes withheld from your check. If you're an undocumented immigrant, it's a lot like you paying those taxes and then you never see any spending that actually goes to you. Take $8,889 if you have that much money and just burn it. That's what it's like for undocumented people living in this country. They don't receive any benefits from paying taxes because they're undocumented. So this far right-wing idea of, oh, these people are mooching off the government, it doesn't exist. It's not possible. It doesn't happen. I'm sorry if that bursts your bubble, but if you actually did a shred of research into it, there is no such thing. So for instance, tax contributions by undocumented immigrants in 2022. Please make sure to send some likes also if you're enjoying the stream. I work hard to produce this kind of content for you all. I'm a working class girly, so it means a lot when you all help me out here. Like the stream, share the live, comment, engage in the chat. Just don't be a jerk, okay? You can see here, in 2022, $96.7 billion in taxes, almost $100 billion in 2022. You see about 33% went to federal social insurance taxes. That's stuff that funds things like Social Security and Medicare, which are programs that undocumented people cannot access because they don't have a social security number. They don't have the proper IDs to qualify to participate in those programs. They are not citizens. Thereby, they can't tap in to receive benefits. Imagine paying, think about it this way. You know, we pay for streaming services, right? Imagine being required to pay for a streaming service, but then because of your pre-existing condition in some sort of way that you can't fix, that you've been trying to fix, but you can't, you don't have access to that streaming service. Imagine paying for something, but you're barred from receiving the benefits from you paying into it. You're paying into a pot of money, but you're never able to actually stick your hand in and access those funds. That's what it's like for undocumented people. Sometimes the government does give a little bit of aid, and I'll talk about some of those instances later on. Specifically for COVID, California did a thing where they handed out a couple different stimulus checks for all people and didn't discriminate based on their citizenship status. That's also because California has 10% of their workforce are undocumented people. So you can't just leave those people in the dust. It's bad for the economy, but also morally that's reprehensible. That all being said, undocumented immigrants pay into a system, but then they never receive the benefits out of it. So you and I, as citizens, we pay into a system, and then depending on your income or your pre-existing conditions, you can qualify for healthcare discounts through the government for Medicaid or the Affordable Care Act, or maybe you can receive some aid in SNAP supplemental insurance assistance programs, or maybe you can receive some benefits with TANF, temporary assistance to needy families. Well, undocumented immigrants don't receive those kinds of benefits. Now, there is a limited provision where SNAP says, yeah, it doesn't matter what your status is, but for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, undocumented immigrants are barred from accessing those programs because they are undocumented. Capiche? So you can see here that they pay into a system, but then they never receive the benefits out of it. So more than a third of tax dollars paid by undocumented immigrants go through payroll taxes, which, if you're not familiar, payroll taxes go to funding things like Social Security, Medicare, unemployment. These are all things that undocumented immigrants cannot access. Imagine paying into something and never being able to access that as a benefit. That's what it's like. Activate your your empathy for just a second. Imagine if someone that you knew was paying into something and then they were never able to receive the benefits of it after paying into it. You'd be like, wow, that's crazy. I'm sorry, that sucks. Now, of course, Republicans' knee-jerk reaction is going to be, oh, well, they're undocumented. It's their fault. It's on them. Do you understand how long it can take even to just get a hearing in front of an immigration judge? It can take up to 10 years. Now, there have been efforts in the past by our government to actually fund a more robust immigration system, hiring more judges so that they can take on more cases, so that we can process people faster. But guess who votes against that? So it's funny because the current system is only exacerbated by our inaction to actually robustly improve it. Anyway, meanwhile, these people pay a good chunk of taxes to programs that they never actually receive. In fact, if you're a U.S. citizen, you should thank undocumented people because these are payroll taxes. So you're like, oh, well, immigrants don't file taxes. Well, some probably do, but also payroll taxes are taxes withheld from your paycheck. So, you know, when you apply for a job and you go through and do all of your withholding and stuff like that, you can't get out of your withholding. Like, you can't just like, oh yeah, I don't want taxes to be withheld from my paycheck. Like, you know? So, it's kind of tough to go around that whole thing. So payroll taxes are dedicated. Payroll taxes, let me actually go through this here. You're like, okay, well, what's a payroll tax? Payroll taxes are taxes withheld from an employee's wages by their employer or directly by their employers, based on the employee's earnings. In the U.S., they primarily include Social Security and Medicare taxes, also known as FICA taxes, federal income tax withholdings, sometimes state and local taxes. So, that all being said, undocumented immigrants in 2022 paid $96.7 billion into taxes. A third of them were FICA, federal social insurance taxes that go to things like funding Social Security, Medicare, unemployment. But because these people are undocumented, they don't have an actual licensed Social Security number. They don't have the authorization to apply for certain programs. That means that they can't access those funds. Meaning, when you are having that money withheld from your paycheck, you're never going to see it again. So U.S. citizens, you know what you should do? You should actually thank undocumented immigrants because they're coming in here and some of their wages are going to your Social Security. I think it's a silly system. If you pay for something, you should be able to receive some benefits out of it. That all being said, it's funny because these people come here with the hope of trying to make a better life for themselves, and our government basically goes through and steals their lunch money. And what do we do in return? We demonize them, fearmonger, claim that they're eating animals out of our parks. Anyway, So going further, you can see about 20% of this $96.7 billion that undocumented immigrants paid for in taxes in 2022 was for federal income tax. Then you also have state and local taxes. That's about 40%. Overall, if you're looking at this and you're like, wow, I did not even realize there's so many different taxes, but of course, undocumented immigrants pay a lot of taxes, but then because of their status, can't access those programs. Now, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm not here to open up a debate or a discussion on that. I'm just simply laying out the facts here. Undocumented immigrants pay into the system and don't receive benefits out of it, which completely flies in the face of the very obvious Republican lie, far-right lie, that they are mooching off the government. It's quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite, which is just baffling to me. So these people pay into the system, and it goes to Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes. Undocumented immigrants don't qualify for unemployment, so they can't receive that either. Now, there's a whole nother section specifically for state and local taxes. Nearly 39% of the total tax dollars paid by undocumented immigrants went to state and local governments, for a total of $37.3 billion in 2022. Now, you can see here that a good chunk of it are property taxes, sales and excise taxes, personal and business income taxes, all of that. Now, what's also really interesting is when you break this down, the undocumented immigrant population and its tax contributions are relatively concentrated in just a few states. 6 states raised more than $1 billion each in tax revenue from undocumented immigrants in 2022. And together, those states made up nearly 2/3, 64%, of all state and local tax collections from undocumented immigrants. The states are among the usual suspects. California, $8.5 billion collected in taxes from undocumented people, state and local taxes. Texas, $4.9 billion. New York, $3.1 billion. Florida, $1.8 billion. Illinois, $1.5 billion. And New Jersey, $1.3 billion. That's a lot of money collected in taxes. Also, the fact that different states, there are a lot of states that have significant populations of undocumented people in the workforce. California, at least 10% of their workforce are undocumented people. So if these people are not taken care of, it can lead to major economic collapse. And that 10%, those undocumented people often take jobs that normal Americans or born and raised Americans like me don't want to take. They take the low-level wage jobs that low-key are kind of slave labor. So, just pointing that all out. Also, what's really interesting, when you break it down here, state and local tax contributions by undocumented immigrants, you can see that states like Florida, Texas, Illinois, California, New York, they receive a lot of money in tax revenue, state and local tax revenue from undocumented people. But that goes through, of course, things like property tax, sales tax. So, you can see here, property taxes, sales and excise taxes, personal business income taxes. So these states receive a good chunk of money from taxes by undocumented immigrants. But do those taxes actually go to helping those people? No. Now, they can sometimes go to public services, which we all can access in some limited capacity. But because of their status as an undocumented person, it's hard for them to access different programs because they don't have an official social security number. So, and because of their status not being a citizen, it bars them from receiving benefits that they pay into. So, my home state of North Carolina, a good chunk of money from state and local taxes comes from undocumented people, from $300 million to $1 billion in the state of North Carolina. Now, what's really interesting, and I want to break this down here, if we were to actually go through and legalize undocumented people, If we were to actually do a process where we legalize people who are undocumented, we would actually get more tax revenue for federal and state and local governments. In particular, if you were to go through oh wait, hold on, that's the wrong one. If you were to go through, I know this is small print. You can see state and local contributions by undocumented immigrants. Here's the state. If you're listening real quick, just look over at the screen. You can see here, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona. You see the current contributions. Then you can see potential contributions with legal status for undocumented people. If we were to go through and legalize undocumented people, that those people are already paying taxes. If we were to go through and actually allow them to swiftly become citizens, have a system where we vet everyone and allow them to live the American dream, all that stuff, then we would actually take in more tax revenue, state and local taxes. So that means that Alabama is leaving money on the table because of their prejudice. That means that if they were to legalize undocumented people, they could see an increase in $344, I believe, $1 million in state and local taxes. So Alaska, it's hard for me to see this menu over here, this column over here, because there's like a menu in the way. I don't know if it's the same for other folks watching the live stream. Alaska, current contributions, potential contributions, they're leaving $2 million on the table. California, if they were to legalize all the undocumented people, they would largely, it would be like almost $2 billion in extra tax revenue. So all of that being said, it's these undocumented people pay a lot into taxes and then they don't receive the benefits from those. And if we were to actually get over our prejudice and help facilitate a more quick, swift process for people to become citizens, we could tax people more, brings in more money to the government, and then it helps us alleviate debt. It helps us do better spending. So it's just, when you look at it, to me, it's common sense. But I want to also highlight another thing here. Since the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy does a lot of really good deep dives, I want to point out this thing here. Undocumented immigrants nationwide paid an effective state and local tax rate of 8.9%. This goes to funding public infrastructure services, institutions, and depending on, your status, you can access certain public services, stuff like that. But because undocumented people are undocumented, they can't access the same kinds of programs because they're not citizens. So, what's interesting is when you compare that to the top 1%, whether you are a George Soros or a Peter Thiel, whether you are very, very wealthy Republican, Democrat, Independent, the top 1% paid an effective state and local tax rate of just 7.2%, meaning that we don't even have a flat tax, meaning that everyone pays the same percentage of their income. In fact, it's actually a regressive tax code, where the top 1% pays a lower tax rate than undocumented people. Now, here comes an opinionated take. That's fucked up. 100%. At least a flat tax. I would want more of a tax rate that is lower for, lower income people, like undocumented people, or working class Americans, or middle class people, because the top 1%, if they pay a lower tax, that's crazy to me. I did this. I looked up the median household income for an undocumented person. It's $30,000 a year. That's like poverty level. Now I looked up the top 1%, a top 1% citizen. It's almost $800,000 as their yearly income. Now you're like, okay, well, when you compare this to this, these people are obviously paying so much more money. Yes, correct. Though I want to point out, because someone, if they have a lower yearly income, that means that every dollar makes more of a difference between affording groceries, affording life, versus and having, like, each dollar for a lower income person means a lot more than each dollar for a top 1% person. You know what I mean? So that all being said, when you look at this, if you have a regressive tax system, yeah, okay, these people are physically paying more, but the big thing to put out of all of this is this: each and every dollar for a lower income person has a lot more value. It goes a lot longer of a way for a working class person versus a top 1%, rich Republican or rich Democrat. Doesn't matter. So I don't think it's even fair, the fact that we have a regressive tax system, at least a flat tax, but I would say that we should tax the rich more. I think that we can, regardless of your political affiliation, be like, yeah, tax the rich more. That's not the system we have in our country. And to tie all of this in, I really just want to point this all out here. Undocumented immigrants in 2022 paid almost $100 billion, with a B, dollars in taxes into our system. But because of their status being undocumented, undocumented people cannot access Social Security. They cannot access Medicare. They cannot access Medicaid. They cannot access unemployment. Meaning these people are paying taxes, whether that's property tax, whether that's sales and excise tax, or payroll tax. They're paying it into the system, never to see it again. So, the money that you pay in taxes, just burn that. If you're a U.S. citizen, just burn it. That's the life of an undocumented person. So, this idea that they are mooching off the government is so laughably false. There are a couple small programs that undocumented people can access, one of them being emergency Medicaid, which is called EMTALA. EMTALA, which was signed into law by a farther-right Republican President, Ronald Reagan. Credit where credit is due. I also want to point out there are some limited provisions where states have a tiny bit of leeway towards helping undocumented people. So for instance, undocumented people do not get unemployment benefits, and because contributed taxes don't guarantee any sort of benefits. But there are states like California or New York that created temporary relief funds for people during COVID, or if there was a huge storm and natural disaster, it hurt a lot of people. There were some ongoing stimulus checks. There were some ongoing aid programs, though it was very, very limited in scope. A one-time payment of $500 per household. Oh, wow. That's a lot. Capped at $1,000 per household for this specific COVID era program. And the current status was it ended. You can see there was a storm assistance program, and you got up to $1,500 per individual, capped at $4,500 per household. Well, current status, that's no similar statewide program for 2025, so it's closed. So you can see here that even when governments go through and try to create some leeway, it's tough. Anyway, I need to get to work. I appreciate every single one of you. To close out the live stream, I just want to point out, undocumented immigrants pay so much into the economy, but because of their status, do not get the benefits of what they pay into. Undocumented immigrants pay in payroll taxes, sales and excise taxes, property taxes, income taxes, but because of their status being undocumented, they don't have a real Social Security number. They can't apply and receive benefits from the government. So this idea that the far right wing narrative that they're always pushing out that these undocumented people are mooching off the government, it's quite the opposite. We are taking their tax dollars that they pay into and using it for programs that benefit us. So if anything, we're mooching off of them. Anyway, regardless of what kind of action steps or you think needs to be taken forward, great, cool, I don't care. I'm just trying to give you the raw, factual information. Obviously, I have my views, my opinions, my beliefs on what needs to happen, but that's just the objective reality at hand. The big takeaway from the live is undocumented immigrants pay a lot of money in taxes, but because they are undocumented, they can't apply for programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, meaning that they can't access it even though they pay into it. Cool? I love all of you. I need to get to work. Y'all are amazing. Shout out to my amazing moderators in here. Cherie, you're awesome. Kate, Akicha, Ellie, I love all of you. Ilisa, Kintisa, Joanna Tech, y'all are incredible. So I appreciate every single one of you. Y'all are awesome. So if you're one of these people that's constantly rage typing in the chat, I hope you have a wonderful day. I really do. You know, I'm not here to hate you, but you're here to hate me. Hate is bad for your soul. Hate gives you acne. Hate gives you high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So maybe don't do that for your own sake. Anyway, I appreciate every single one of you. Just remember that you are beautiful, you are loved, you are valid, you are strong, and you are fierce. Don't let anyone or anything ever, 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 ever dim your shine. I love all of you so much. Bye! Love you, mods. Thanks, Akicha. You're awesome. I think I almost forgot to give you a shout out. Y'all are incredible. Have a wonderful day. Bye!